Our reading this morning is a poem. Can everyone hear me on this mic? Yeah? Okay, great. Is a poem by Katie Ferris called "Why Write Love Poetry in a Burning World?" Why write love poetry in a burning world? To train myself to find in the midst of hell what isn't hell. The body bald, cancerous, but still beautiful enough to imagine living. The body washing the body, replacing a loose front porch step. The body chewing what it takes to keep a body going. This scene has a tune, a language I can read, a door I cannot close. I stand within its wedge, a shield. Why write love poetry in a burning world? To train myself in the midst of a burning world to offer poems of love to a burning world. Friends, I have just returned from a journey, a pilgrimage to the end of the world. And this morning, I want to share with you what I saw there, what I witnessed, and what that journey taught me about how we might best confront the many endings, large and small, in our own lives, and how together we might face our collective apocalyptic fears, the unsettling possibility of the end of the world as we know it. My sermon is called "To the End of the World and Back Again." On the northwest coast of Spain, in the province of Galicia, there is a small finger of land that juts out into the North Atlantic Ocean, a rugged, rocky mound battered by wind and sea. The Spaniards call this place Finisterre, which comes from the Latin finis, end, and terre, world, the end of the world. You see, the ancient inhabitants of the Iberian Peninsula believed Finisterre to be the westernmost point of the continent, and therefore, literally, the end of the known world. There was the ocean, and at the end of there was the horizon, and for all they knew, after that was just a void, the end of the world. And to be sure, Finisterre doesn't disappoint the apocalyptic imagination. To walk out on that spit of land even today is to be buffeted by winds that are strong enough to knock you off your feet, and to look out over vertigo-inducing cliffs over a vast and roiling sea. Sailors have long called this forbidding coastline the Costa de Muerte, the coast of death, for all the lives lost here to shipwreck. So Finisterre is a forbidding place, but it's also a sacred place. Long before Christians began making pilgrimages to nearby Santiago de Compostela, the Celts and other ancient peoples made pilgrimages here to Finisterre. They journeyed to this place they believed to be the end of the world, and at dusk watched the sun as it disappeared below the watery horizon. And they prayed. They prayed that the sun wouldn't abandon them. They prayed for its return. From great slabs of rock, they built altars to the sun, altars that remain to this day, and that bear witness to the fact that our ancient ancestors found spiritual significance in this act of confronting the end of the world as they knew it. It strikes me that it must have taken courage, no? For our ancestors to have journeyed to that place and confronted that frightening possibility of the end of the world. I mean, they could have not made the long journey. They could have stayed home, but they came in groups large and small. They came face to face with their fears and together offered up a prayer for their collective deliverance. It must have taken courage. And it still does, doesn't it? To this very day, it takes courage for us to confront the endings, large and small, in our own lives, and the possibility of the end of the world as we know it. After all, we live at a time when rumors of the end of the world run wild, while apocalyptic fantasies play out on our movie screens. Apocalyptic realities fill the nightly news. Rising seas, blazing fires, collapsing ecosystems, crumbling democracies. You don't need me to recite the list. At the end of the 19th century, the philosopher William James spoke words that are more true today than when he first uttered them. He said, "Friends, we live in a world that is uncertain of being saved." And then he asked, "Are you willing to participate in such a world? Are you willing to risk loving a world whose salvation is uncertain?" This was the question on my mind when last month I made my own pilgrimage to Finisterre, joined by 24 other Unitarians from the Boston area. We walked nearly 100 miles along the fabled Camino de Santiago, beginning in Santiago de Compostela and ending at the ocean at Finisterre. Many of us made the journey because we ourselves were grappling with endings in our lives. Lost relationships, lost jobs. One pilgrim wrestled with unresolved grief over his father's death. Another carried with her the ashes of her recently deceased mother. And at the end of the journey, when she finally made it to Finisterre, she scattered a portion of her mom's ashes to the wind and the sea and said goodbye. Having now led many such walking pilgrimages, I've learned that each pilgrim takes to the road for a deeply personal reason. Each of us has something in our souls that needs to be worked through. And for me, at least, there's something about walking that helps my soul do that working through. The simple act of placing one foot in front of the other over and over again, nothing else to do, frees up my mind and soul to do their work. The Buddha said, "Work out your salvation with diligence." And he himself took to the roads as a wanderer, as a pilgrim in his own right. And that's what it seemed each of us was doing on this pilgrimage, working out our own salvation. And so there's this sense in which this pilgrimage is a profoundly personal and sometimes lonely journey. There's a sense in which every pilgrim walks alone. But what I've learned is that there's another truth. There's another sense in which a pilgrim never walks alone. I've got to tell you, when you walk the Camino, you're never unaware of the fact that people have been walking that same path for centuries, if not millennia. The presence of those ancestors, their prayers, their hopes, their fears are palpable on the journey. It's not only that you walk in their footsteps, it's that they accompany you along the way. You're not alone. What's more, we were joined on the Camino by pilgrims from all over the world, college students from Germany, young adults from Africa and South America, a sweet church group from South Korea that offered me some trail mix when I'd run out of food along the way. And though we all spoke different languages, we greeted one another always with a traditional Camino greeting, Buen Camino. That common greeting that meant we were in this together. Our little group of Unitarians from Boston was especially close. We shared meals together. We gathered each night for prayer and song and told about our experiences from the day. One day, we each of us walked carrying a piece of paper that carried the prayer of another person in our group, literally carrying one another's burdens with us on the journey. And each night we sang a song together that reminded us that we never walk alone. Just a little song that I want to sing for you right now. It's very simple. It just says, walking, walking with you is my prayer. I wonder if you'll sing it with me. I'll sing it through one more time. You can listen, and then we'll sing it through 3 times together. Okay? Walking, walking with you is my prayer. Walking, walking with you is my prayer. Again. Walking, walking with you is my prayer. One last time. Very good. Walking, walking with you is my prayer. You know, one of the things I realized in Joys and Concerns today is that you guys already get this. You guys already do this. You walk with one another. You support one another. You pick one another up when you stumble along the journey. A few years back, I heard a talk given by the great, wise spiritual teacher Thomas More, who wrote the book Care of the Soul. And he said to a group of ministers one day, he said, all the great literature on the soul shows and attests to the fact that the one thing the soul needs more than anything else, more than a prayer, more than a practice, is a friend. The soul needs a friend. Not a Facebook friend. A friend, right? Walking with you is my prayer. The most important thing that I learned on my journey to the end of the world is never walk alone. But what else did the journey to Finisterre teach me? The pilgrimage reminded me that even as we travel through an unknown land to an unknown future, we must remember to savor every step of the journey. I'll tell you, day after day, as I moved across the face of the good earth, at the pace of my own footfall, not of a speeding car, it transformed my relationship to time, space, and earth. Everything slows down. I began to feel and to trust the point of contact between the bottoms of my feet and the surface of the earth. I learned that there was strength there and intimacy with the creation all around me. The smell of eucalyptus and Galician pine, the colors of foxglove and Scotch broom, the songs of warblers and the lowing of cattle. It's true that when I finally arrived at the coast at Finisterre, the buffeting winds and the vast sea made me feel small and powerless, but I also felt a part of it all, and thus enlarged. I want to carry that ample sense of self, that intimate relationship with the earth, with me into whatever the future might bring. I know I've shared with you, some of you before, one of my favorite lines from the author E.B. White, who wrote Charlotte's Web. E.B. White once wrote, "Each morning, I wake up torn between two impulses: the impulse to save the world and the impulse to savor the world." And then he added, "It makes it hard to plan my day," right? And I'll bet many of us have been torn by this choice. Do I slow down and savor life's blessings, or do I leap to the barricades and fight the good fight? I think we've all learned by now that this is a false choice, right? We must both savor and save the world. The two are inextricably linked. Think about it. Why would you bother saving a planet whose beauty and grandeur you had not delighted in? As the poet reminded us earlier, we must write love poems even when the world is burning. One last lesson I learned on my pilgrimage to Finisterre. It's this: it's that sometimes what we fear is the end of the world is not, in fact, the end of the world. When the ancients came to Finisterre, they weren't, in fact, at the end of the world. It was just the end of the world as they knew it to be, as they thought it to be. Other possibilities lay beyond, possibilities, futures they had not yet imagined, right? It makes me wonder how the apocalyptic stories that we tell one another might serve to limit our own moral imagination. I'm not suggesting that we be complacent about the crises we face. I'm suggesting that perhaps we need a new life-giving story, a new vision. Which leads me to my final thought. When pilgrims arrive at Finisterre, having completed their journeys, the tradition is to gather on the rocks at the furthest tip of that peninsula, right out, sticking out in the ocean, and watch the sun set into the horizon, into the sea. So that's what we did. But it was June, and so sunset wasn't till like 10 o'clock at night. And by that time of night, the wind had abated enough that a calm prevailed on the ocean. The moon was already rising over our shoulders in the east, and the setting sun in the west lit up the whole sky. The ocean glittered its reflection. Everyone was silent and a little bit in awe. It was beautiful. And in that moment, I thought again about those ancient ancestors making their journey to what they believed to be the end of the world. The fear and trepidation they must have felt, the courage that it must have taken for them to make that journey. And I wondered if it came as a surprise to them too, to discover that the end of the world was beautiful. The sun, the ocean, the sky, a place of beauty. It made me wonder if we too don't have a beautiful surprise in store for us. I wonder if we, or our children, or our children's children, will one day discover that the endings that we now anticipate for our own lives or for our world might also be beautiful new beginnings. Beginnings full of possibilities that lie beyond the limits of our present imagination. I don't know that to be true. But having journeyed to the end of the world, I do now hold it out as a possibility. And I offer that possibility to you and to your imagination with love. Amen.